So we have breaking news. Trump can't use the military for whatever he wants. Thus summed up today's video, and this is coming from the courts. It says here, Trump must stop his use of troops in LA protest, judge says. That's being reported from Bloomberg. This is a major win for democracy. This is a major win for California and a major win for the American people. Gavin Newsom, who actually, and him in California, filed a lawsuit against Trump. He has a statement here, breaking. The court just confirmed what we all know. The military belongs on the battlefield, not on our city streets. The win is not just for California, but the nation. It's a check on a man whose authoritarian tendencies are increasing by the day, and the illegal militarization of Los Angeles now. And that is a message directly to Trump. History is watching. I want to read through the details of this ruling because I think it is quite important. That's what we're focusing on right now. This is what it says. The Trump administration must pull back on its use of military troops in Los Angeles to deal with protests over the president's immigration raids, according to a federal judge. And, just reading these sentences, it's like, is this even reality, right? Trump, right, American president trying to use the military on American soil. U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer ordered the Trump administration to return control of the California National Guard to state leaders and cease efforts to direct those troops to respond to protests while a lawsuit challenging the actions proceeds. California had sued to block the administration's deployment. And remember, usually in these situations, like if you're going to use the military in a positive way for disaster relief, any kind of thing like that, the state would request help, right? In this situation, Trump's just like, hey, I'm president. That's my toy army. Don't you know I'm having a military parade to celebrate my birthday? And now I'm just going to use the military whenever I want to quell freedom of speech. Don't you know? Well, in fact, Mr. President, it turns out things you're doing are unconstitutional, illegal. So that's why courts are stepping in. And unfortunately, I think Trump may try to ignore this order. And this is where it gets dicey. I'm sure you guys know. I think we have a constitutional crisis on our hands, and we're going to see how Trump responds. But I'm just telling you the ruling right now. It says here, the ruling doesn't take effect until noon on Friday in California, the judge said. So as of recording, I think that should be tomorrow. I don't know, maybe 10 to 12 hours from now, something like that. Here's a quote here. At this early stage of the proceedings, the court must determine whether the president followed the congressionally mandated procedure for his actions. He did not, and that's coming from the judge. His actions were illegal, both exceeding the scope of his statutory authority and violating the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. So the judge is saying what Trump did is illegal. If you're watching this channel, you probably know this stuff. Trump is a felon. He doesn't care about the law. That's Trump doesn't care about the law. And, this is something, regardless if you care about the law or not, we need to uphold the law, right? The law doesn't care about your feelings, Trump. What else it says here? It says White House representatives didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. Of course not. The Trump administration immediately notified the court that it intends to appeal the decision to the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Yeah, sure. They're going to fight in the courts. We'll see how this, turns out. So at the moment, though, the control does have to go back to California, is what it sounds like to me. But again, we may have a constitutional crisis on our hands. We had the situation here in Korea. I've talked about this before several times, where President Yoon, tried to do a martial law. It was basically illegal. The regular people stood up and said no. Lawmakers stood up and also said no. The president was ultimately impeached and now is facing a criminal trial. And, we did it all peacefully, which is how things should be done. And that's how democracy works, right? You fight with words, not with your fist. What else would it say here? It says demonstrators in Los Angeles have clashed for days with law enforcement, sometimes violently, which I don't approve of. So I want to make that clear. While Governor Gavin Newsom and President Donald Trump are at odds over how to restore order and who should do it, the activities have spurred a dispute over the limits of Trump's executive powers. Attorneys for California had asked Breyer to bar the troops from helping federal law enforcement in immigration raids, though they would be allowed to protect federal courthouses, right? So the idea would be, what can you use troops for? What can you not use troops for, right? That's why I mentioned the thing of like, say, disaster aid or setting up hospitals. So in this situation, right, could you protect, say, federal buildings, but not, do any sort of raids? Okay, let's read some more here. Though they would be allowed to protect federal courthouses, offices, and personnel. In the request for an emergency order, they argued that the military deployment, quotes, creates imminent harm to state sovereignty and escalates tension. So that's the argument that California is making on that. And then Trump, this is on the Trump side because I want to tell you guys what they're saying. It says here, the president has called the demonstrations, quote, migrant riots, and said on his True Social platform that his decision to call the troops has helped address unrest in the city. And I think the direct quote from Trump, he'll say, like, if I didn't call the military in, everything would be burning down. That's the kind of stuff that Trump says. And this is actually says here, without the military presence, he said, and this is an actual direct quote, Los Angeles would be a crime scene like we haven't seen in years. That's how Trump talks about this stuff. What else is going on? Trump actually, and I saw this in the news also, he wants to keep using the National Guard, military, etc., for all of his deportations and such. This is a headline coming out of Washington Post right now. It says Trump plans broader use of National Guard in immigration enforcement. So that's what I'm saying. Even though right now there's basically a pause on Trump's using the military, right? The courts are saying, hey, give it back control to the California. We're going to see as it takes effect tomorrow, and Trump may try to do other things with the military. Maybe we're going to have more parades or whatever, but right here, we're talking about trying to use the National Guard for more immigration enforcement. Let's read the details. It says the Trump administration wants to use National Guard more broadly, right, to enact the president's immigration agenda, according to border czar Tom Homan. If you guys know who that is, it's the guy who's basically sounds like he's drunk all the time. And I wish I were making that up. I am not kidding. It's so stressful talking about this stuff. Here's a quote here. They can't make immigration arrests, but they can certainly augment security, transportation, infrastructure, intelligence. I see. And this is where, again, this is where it's sort of the legal disputes are, is like, what can you use the military for? What can you not use it for, right? Oftentimes for a lot of these kind of things, these people aren't trained properly in what Trump wants to use them for. And that's where you start to get a lot of problems. And, if you want to talk about the situation with the police in USA, we have a lot of training issues with that as well. And the best way to describe this stuff is if you want to avoid any sort of problems in this way, right? You put people in positions where they're going to succeed. What Trump is doing is he's putting people in the positions to where there's going to be chaos. That's sort of what Trump's up to. And then the people that he puts in charge are immoral, they're unqualified, they're inexperienced, and it's like leads for disaster. That's sort of why we're seeing so much chaos that we do on a daily basis. I feel like every day, Trump's trying to like, hey, how can I push the law? How can I, try to extend my power? How can I test the limits? That's what he's up to on a daily basis. And, I think it's a good thing when the courts step in and say, hey, that's not within your power. That's against the Constitution. If Trump wants to change his power, go through Congress to do said things, right? Let's do it the proper way. If Trump wants to make any kinds of arrests, these kind of stuff, do the proper investigations, get a warrant, right? Go through proper channels, follow due process. For Trump and his people, they just basically want to do things as quick as possible before anyone notices. But, we're in an era where information moves very, very quickly. And when word gets out, right, people basically rise up. And, what Newsom did, he filed lawsuits immediately. The courts are now, stepping in, they're looking at everything. And we'll see the end result of this. So this is not over yet. And I think tomorrow's deadline will be key, whether or not orders will be, given. I'll say this. So now the court has made an order. Trump will probably say whatever and make whatever orders, and then it'll be up to leadership, right, in the National Guard. You can also mention the Marines to decide, what to do. And I'll just say this: do not fall in a legal order. Trump people will go down in history as being the worst administration in U.S. history, and you do not want to be on the wrong side of history. So I do appreciate your time, everyone, and I'll catch you on the next video.